Okay, imagine this for a second. What if the language you use, the words you use to talk about the world, what if it's like a map?
Right.
And not just any map, but one that actually sets the boundaries for what can even be on the map. Like,
Yeah.
the limits of your language are literally the limits of your world.
That's the core idea, yeah. It's really quite radical.
It's pretty mind-bending stuff, and that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We're looking at Ludwig Wittgenstein, specifically his really intense work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus.
It's quite something, a monumental piece of philosophy.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's this huge attempt to basically draw a precise line around what we can think, what we can actually say meaningfully, and
Yeah.
what we just have to be silent about.
Exactly. And our mission here for this deep dive is to pull out the key takeaways from this, let's be honest, very dense philosophical text. You've given us these key excerpts, the numbered propositions.
Yeah, the side-by-side translations are helpful for navigating it.
Definitely. So we want to help you really grasp Wittgenstein's main arguments. How does language work according to him? How does it picture reality? And crucially, what can't it do? What falls outside? We're aiming for those aha moments, the kind that can genuinely shift how you see things.
Okay, so to get started, Wittgenstein lays out this very specific, almost architectural view of the world right at the beginning. How does he break it down?
Well, he starts with this fundamental distinction between what he calls atomic facts, or Sachverhalt, and then just plain facts, Tatsachen.
Atomic facts, okay.
Yeah, think of an atomic fact as the absolute simplest state of affairs you can have. Something that isn't built out of other simpler facts.
Right, like a single Lego brick, maybe?
Kind of, yeah. So his example is helpful. Socrates is wise. That's an atomic fact, a Sachverhalt. It's also a Tatsache, a fact.
Okay.
But Socrates is wise, and Plato is his pupil. That's a Tatsache, a fact. But it's not atomic because, well, you can clearly see it's made of two simple parts.
Got it. So the world, for him, is just all the atomic facts that happen to exist.
Precisely. The totality of existing atomic facts. That is the world.
Okay, that makes sense as a foundation. So if these atomic facts are the basic building blocks, what are they made of? What's inside the Lego brick?
Ah, good question. They're made of objects, or Gegenstände. And these objects are, for him, absolutely simple. They can't be broken down any further.
Really simple.
Yeah, they're the ultimate constituents. They form the very substance of the world. Now, he says something interesting. They are colorless.
Colorless, what does that mean? Objects usually have properties, like color.
Right. It sounds weird. What he means, I think, is that the objects in themselves, abstracted from any situation, don't have properties like color. Instead, things like space, time, and color are the forms of objects they represent, the ways objects can combine with each other in atomic facts.
Okay, so the potential for properties, not the properties themselves.
Exactly. The objects themselves contain the possibility of all situations. They're the raw potential. And here's another subtle point. He argues against this idea called the identity of indiscernibles,
Which says,
that if you have two things with all the exact same properties, they must actually be the same single thing. Wittgenstein says no two objects could share the same logical form, meaning they have the same possibilities of combination, but still be distinct simply because they are two. They don't need a differing property to be different. Just being numerically distinct is enough.
wow, okay,
Yeah.
that's deep. So if the world is just these simple objects combining into atomic facts, what does that imply for describing the world completely?
It means, and this is a direct quote, the world is fully described if all atomic facts are known, together with the fact that these are all of them.
Nothing else needed.
Nothing else. You know all the simplest states of affairs that exist, and you know that's the complete list. That's it. That total picture, which atomic facts exist and which don't, is what he calls reality.
And these atomic facts, are they connected? Does one imply another?
No, and that's absolutely crucial. They are totally independent. He says, from the existence or non-existence of an atomic fact, we cannot infer the existence or non-existence of another. Each one is logically separate.
Okay, this is where my brain starts to bend a bit. He then connects this world structure directly to language, calling propositions pictures. What's he really getting at with this whole picture theory?
Right. This is probably the most famous part of the Tractatus. He literally says a proposition is a picture of reality.
A literal picture.
Well, a logical picture. The idea is that the elements in the proposition, the words or signs, are put together, quote, combined with one another in a definite way, And this structure mirrors the structure of the elements in the possible situation it represents.
So the structure is the key.
Absolutely. The thing they have in common, the picture and the reality, or possible reality, is logical form. That shared structure is what makes representation possible.
And it represents a possible situation, not necessarily a real one.
Exactly. A picture represents a possible state of affairs. What the picture represents is its sense, he says. And whether it's true or false just depends on whether its sense, the situation it depicts, actually matches reality.
And we understand these pictures. How? Do we need explanations?
That's another fascinating point. He says a proposition can communicate a new sense to us, and crucially, we understand it without its sense having been explained to me. The picture shows its sense. You grasp the possible situation just by understanding the proposition's structure and its elements.
Okay, so propositions are these logical pictures. What about the physical stuff, the sentence itself, the sounds, or the written words? He makes a point about the propositional sign, doesn't he?
He does, and it's important. He says the propositional sign is a fact.
The sign itself is a fact.
Yes, the arrangement of words on the page or sounds in the air constitutes a fact in the world. It's not just a jumble, it's articulate. He contrasts it with, say, a mixture of words, think like alphabet soup, versus something structured, like a musical theme where the arrangement matters.
Right, the order and relation are part of it.
Exactly. He gives this great analogy. Imagine using actual tables, chairs, and books arranged in a specific way in a room. The mutual spatial position of these things, he says, then expresses the sense of the proposition.
So it's the configuration that speaks.
Precisely, which leads to the punchline. Only facts can express a sense, a class of names cannot. Names, words on their own, don't say anything. They only get meaning in the context of a proposition.
This really makes you think about how often our normal language might, well, hide what's really going on logically. How does he suggest we deal with that confusion?
Yeah, he's very critical of ordinary language for precisely this reason. He states quite bluntly, language disguises the thought.
Disguises it.
Yeah, like camouflage. He thinks most philosophical problems arise simply because we do not understand the logic of our language. We get tangled up.
Can you give an example?
His classic example is the word is. Think about it. The rose is red. Predication. God is existence. 2 + 2 is 4. Equality. We use the same little word is, but logically it's functioning in completely different ways.
Right. That looks like the same symbol, but it isn't really.
Exactly. And that, he says, causes the most fundamental confusions. His solution. We need a logically perfect language, a sign language that obeys the rules of logical grammar, of logical syntax.
Something that wouldn't let you use the same sign for different meanings.
Correct. A language designed specifically to exclude these errors. It would make the underlying logical structure completely transparent. And ultimately, he thinks, the application of logic decides what elementary propositions there are. Logic itself will show us the basic building blocks of meaning.
Okay, so if language needs this logical precision, and propositions are these structured pictures, what is logic itself in this system? He talks about propositions being truth functions. What does that mean?
Right. He says all propositions are truth functions of elementary propositions. What this means, basically, is that any complex statement's truth or falsity depends entirely on the truth or falsity of the elementary propositions it's built from.
Like using and or not.
Exactly, those logical operators. You combine atomic propositions, which remember are logically independent, one doesn't imply another, using these operators to build up everything else.
So where do the truths of logic themselves fit in? Like it's raining or it's not raining?
That's key. For Wittgenstein, all the propositions of logic are tautologies. Things like P or not P. They are true no matter what.
Because they cover all possibilities.
Precisely. And importantly, you can recognize that they are true from the symbol alone. You don't need to check the weather to know it's raining or it's not raining is true. Its truth is built into its logical structure. It tells you nothing new about the world.
So if logical truths are just tautologies, always true by structure, what does that do to the idea of logical inference? How do we get from one statement to another logically?
It radically simplifies it. He argues all inference takes place a priori, meaning just by looking at the propositions themselves before any experience. The justification for an inference lies within the propositions involved.
You don't need extra rules of inference.
Exactly. He directly criticizes folks like Frege and Russell for relying on separate laws of inference. He calls such laws senseless and would be superfluous. If you properly understand the propositions, the logical connection is already there, or it isn't.
So things like if-then or, they aren't really objects in logic.
Not at all. He says these apparent logical constants actually disappear when you analyze the structure properly. They function more like, well, like punctuation marks, showing the relationship between propositions rather than representing some kind of logical thing. As he puts it, logical objects, there are none.
Wow. Okay, that's a stark view of logic. What about mathematics then? Is it just another branch of logic for him?
Pretty much, yes. He says clearly mathematics is a logical
A
method.
method, not a body of knowledge about numbers or shapes.
Right. Mathematical propositions for him are equations and therefore pseudo-propositions. They don't actually picture facts about the world
Pseudo propositions. Why pseudo?
because they don't represent contingent states of affairs. Their truth, like logical tautologies, can be seen internally. He says the possibility of proving the propositions of mathematics means simply that their correctness can be perceived without its being necessary, that what they express should itself be compared with the facts.
So calculation is just a way to see that internal correctness.
Exactly. The process of calculating serves to bring about that intuition, that insight into the equation's validity. Math reveals the workings of logical structure. It doesn't describe the world.
This logical framework has huge implications.
Hmm.
Which brings us to, well, a really big one, causality.
Yeah.
His view here seems to undermine a lot of how we normally think science works.
Oh, absolutely. This is one of the most startling consequences of his logic. He argues that within his system, there cannot be any such thing as a causal nexus.
No causal connection between events.
Yeah.
At all.
Not in a logical sense. He says, the events of the future cannot be inferred from those of the present. And then the really provocative line, superstition is the belief in the causal nexus.
Superstition, that's incredibly strong language. What does he mean? If I drop a ball, it falls. Isn't that cause and effect?
Well, yes, we observe that
Mhm.
regularity. But Wittgenstein's point is that there's no logical necessity involved. There's no compulsion making one thing happen because another has happened. The only necessity that exists is logical necessity, like in tautologies, not physical necessity. Just because B always follows A in our experience doesn't mean A logically compels B.
So the laws of nature, like gravity or the laws of conservation, are they just elaborate superstitions then?
Not quite superstitions, but he sees them differently. He says, the law of causality is not a law, but the form of a law. Think of laws like causality or scientific principles like continuity or least action. He sees these as a priori insights about the forms in which the propositions of science can be cast.
The form of a law.
Like
a template.
Kind of, yeah. He uses this analogy of a net. Imagine describing a surface using a net with, say, square meshes. The fact that you describe the surface using squares tells you something about your net, your descriptive system, not necessarily about the fundamental nature of the surface itself.
So the laws describe our scientific language, our framework, not the world directly.
Precisely. They describe the net, the logical framework we impose, not the world independent of that net. That's why he says something like, the Darwinian theory has no more to do with philosophy than any other hypothesis in natural science. It's a description within the scientific framework, not a statement about the ultimate nature of reality or logic.
Okay, that clarifies the laws a bit. But what about simple induction? The sun has risen every day, so I expect it to rise tomorrow. That seems fundamental.
He addresses that directly. He says the process of induction consists in accepting as true the simplest law that can be reconciled with our experiences. It's a pragmatic principle.
But is it logically justified?
No, he's emphatic. This process has no logical justification, but only a psychological one. Psychological? Meaning it's just how our minds work.
Basically, yes. It's a habit, an expectation based on past patterns. He gives the sun example, that the sun will rise tomorrow, and this means that we do not know whether it will rise. Logically speaking, the past doesn't guarantee the future. Therefore, there are no grounds for believing that the simplest eventuality will in fact be realized.
Wow. No logical basis for induction. That really pulls the rug out from under a lot of certainty.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It highlights the strict limits he places on what logic can guarantee about the world.
Which brings us squarely to those limits. Given this incredibly precise, almost austere view of language and logic, what lies beyond? What can't be captured by these logical pictures?
This is where we get to the famous, almost mystical part of the Tractatus. He states, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world.
My language, my world. That sounds personal.
It does. He continues, logic fills the world. The limits of the world are also its limits. And crucially, What we cannot think, we cannot think. So what we cannot think, we cannot say either. So if it doesn't fit the logical picture structure, it's literally unthinkable and unsayable.
Correct. He uses this analogy of your field of vision. You don't see the edge of your vision, right? Because there's nothing visual outside it. Similarly, logic defines the boundary of the thinkable world from within. There's no logical outside.
It sounds like it leads towards solipsism, the idea that only my own mind is sure to exist. He talks about that, doesn't he? But in a weird way.
He does, and it's very peculiar. He says, what solipsism intends is quite correct, but this cannot be said, it can only be shown.
Shown, not said. That theme again.
Yes. He equates the world and life are one, and states, I am my world. But then he clarifies this I isn't the everyday person, the psychological self.
Who is it then?
It's the philosophical self, the metaphysical subject, which is the limit of the world, not a part of it. It's like the eye that sees the visual field but isn't in the visual field. He explicitly rejects the idea of the soul as it is conceived in the superficial psychology of the present day.
So this I is just a boundary point.
Exactly. And this leads to the paradox. Solipsism, when its implications are followed out strictly, coincides with pure realism. Because once you realize the I is just this abstract limit, this point without extension, what's left is simply reality. The subjective viewpoint collapses into the objective world it perceives.
Okay, that's a lot to wrap your head around. So if the self is just this limit point and language is for facts, where do things like ethics, morality, value, beauty fit in? Can we say anything meaningful about them?
According to the Tractatus, no. He's quite direct. There can be no ethical propositions.
None at all. Why not?
Because ethics deals with value, with good and bad, which are not facts in the world. Ethics, he says, is transcendental. It lies beyond the limits of factual, pictorial language. Interestingly, he also equates it with beauty. Ethics and aesthetics are one and the same.
Transcendental. So where do reward and punishment come in?
They must reside in the action itself. It's not about future consequences in the world of facts. Furthermore, he suggests that willing good or bad doesn't change the facts of the world, but it can alter the limits of the world.
Alter the limits? How?
It changes the world as a whole. This leads to statements like, the world of the happy man is a different one from that of the unhappy man. The facts might be the same, but the world feels different. Its overall character changes. It's about perspective, about the world viewed subspecie eternity under the aspect of eternity.
And what about death?
Death, he says, is not an event of life. We don't live to experience death. When death occurs, the world simply ceases for that subject. And this connects to his idea of eternity as timelessness. Living eternally means living fully in the present.
This is sounding less like logic and more like, well, mysticism. He uses that word, doesn't he? The mystical.
He does, and he defines it quite specifically. Not how the world is the mystical, but that it is. The sheer existence of the world, the fact that there is something rather than nothing, that is the mystical.
So it's a feeling about the world as a whole.
Yes. Feeling the world as a limited whole, it is this that is mystical. And again, this can't be put into words. There are indeed things that cannot be put into words. They make themselves manifest. They are what is mystical.
And the problem of life.
The solution of the problem of life is seen in the vanishing of the problem. Once you understand the limits of language, the questions that seemed like deep philosophical problems about meaning or ethics often dissolve because you realize they were trying to say the unsayable.
Okay, but if all the really important stuff, ethics, the self, the mystical, the meaning of life, if it all lies beyond language, it can only be shown. What is the point of philosophy? What's the point of the Tractatus itself, or even this deep dive we're doing right now?
That's the ultimate self-referential puzzle of the book. His answer is that philosophy isn't about creating a set of true doctrines or theories. It's not a body of doctrine, but an activity.
An activity of what?
Philosophy aims at the logical clarification of thoughts. A philosophical work, like his own, consists essentially of elucidations. It tries to make clear what can be said, and by doing so reveals the boundary.
So the correct method would be?
He lays it out. To say nothing except what can be said, i.e. propositions of natural science, and then, whenever someone else wanted to say something metaphysical, to demonstrate to him that he had failed to give a meaning to certain signs in his propositions.
Just point out where people are talking nonsense, basically.
Essentially, yes. He admits this would be unsatisfying and wouldn't feel like teaching philosophy, but it's the only strictly correct method. It forces you up against the limits.
Which brings us to his famous final instruction about his own book.
Right. The latter analogy. My propositions serve as elucidations in the following way. Anyone who understands me eventually recognizes them as nonsensical when he has used them as steps to climb up beyond them.
You have to use the nonsensical propositions of the Tractatus to see the world correctly, and then throw them away.
Exactly. He must transcend these propositions, and then he will see the world aright. It's a tool to reach clarity, but the tool itself operates at the edge of sense.
And having climbed the ladder, having seen the limits, what's left?
Silence, his final single-sentence proposition, number 7. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent.
And there you have it, a pretty intense journey through Wittgenstein's Tractatus, from atomic facts and logical pictures to the limits of language and the call for silence. It's a complete rethinking of how language relates to reality.
Absolutely. You've essentially just navigated one of the most formidable and influential philosophical works of the 20th century. This deep dive gives you, a solid handle on its core, radical ideas about the world, language, logic, and what simply lies beyond expression. It really forces you to reconsider the foundations of communication and knowledge.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If Wittgenstein is right, if the deepest philosophical problems dissolve when we understand the limits of language, and the goal is clarity about the sayable to reveal the unsayable, what does that truly mean for our endless human quest for understanding? Does ultimate insight come from mapping the world ever more precisely within those limits? Or does it lie somewhere else entirely in that silent acknowledgement of the vastness beyond what our words can ever touch?